Let's call our meeting to order. John, can you call the roll?
Mr. Johnson.
I'm here.
Mr. Borgman.
Here.
I note that Mr. Holkey is not present this evening. Mr. Ebro.
Here.
Judge Cruz is here. I am here, and Council President Gordy Earl is present.
Thank you. Public comment period. At this time, the commission would recognize members of the public who've indicated a desire to address the commission. Seeing none. Commissioner, council, and staff comments. Commissioners, any comments before we get going? No? Gordy, anything from the council?
Yeah, but not at this point. When we get down into Melissa's report in regard to, what was it here? Employee wage thing, I'd like to say a few things, because some of the stuff in there is relevant to what we're doing at City Hall.
Welcome your comments at that time.
Yes, thank you.
Staff comments before we get going? No? Okay. Presentation of Employee Service Award.
Randy Ayer has been here for 5 years, and I actually have a cheat sheet because in those 5 years, he's accomplished quite a bit. He actually worked here in the office from 2008, 2009, and 2010 as a temporary help. We were very impressed with his abilities and what he did. So we brought him on as an engineering intern in 2011. He worked there. Again, very impressed with what he did there. In July 2011, he became a full-time employee. He had gone through the apprenticeship program, and he started that class. Or then in 2013, in addition to that, he started working toward an associate degree in Journey Worker Associate of Applied Science, and you've since completed that, right? So, very impressive for 5 years on the job. So
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Okay, approval of the strategic plan.
We've got color copies for everyone, but I see, John, did you print your own nice fancy copy?
It was in our packet.
But we thought we'd give you a glossy copy here.
Well, good. I'll take one that's not all marked up.
That's not a good sign.
Marked up. Revisions?
Just seeing if I can get your attention, Bob.
So the body of the strategic plan, for the most part, has not changed since the last time we met. The one item that has changed or has been added, the first page beyond the cover, Mike and Bob did add an introduction and kind of a summary statement. And then the remainder of the document is just formatting and adding photos and trying to pretty it up. So from here, what our plan would be then would be to report back to the commission on a quarterly basis. With the first report coming, we would compile all of our information the end of September and have that presentation for you guys available at the October commission meeting.
Is there a motion to approve the strategic plan?
I so move.
John, is there a second?
I'll second.
Harry. Discussion, questions,
Two minor points, if I may.
please?
Page 4, bullet point 3. And I know we talked about this, but when I read it, that only at the end of the sentence seems somewhat abrupt. Did we really mean that? That this is the only avenue for us to send money upstream? And if it's if it's the group recollection that that's what we meant, I have no objection to it. It just, when I went back and reread it, it was like, oh.
I don't remember. I know
think
we
this-
went through each of these.
Yeah, I think it was part of our broader discussion about the role of the utility in gifting and charity, and that we would give through pilot and dividend and leave the rest of those decisions to the city.
Okay, I have no objection to it, just my recollection wasn't clear.
You're right, it's abrupt, but I think that's what it was.
It is what it is.
That's my take.
Okay.
What was your second point?
I love the photographs, I love the presentation. I did note that it's a little electric heavy. There could have been some pictures of the water side. We do have both utilities, and if the opportunity presents itself to do a little creative editing, I would encourage that.
This one on page 6, the bottom of page 6 is actually the water main simulation, and then the last page is a water page as well, picture as well.
I'll tell you why I said that. I mean, if we look at the rate increase that we're creatively asking PSC for, to help fund $75 million in water main replacement or lining, we've just spent several $1 million on a new water tower. We're spending $500,000 on a water tower currently for maintenance on it. I don't want the public perception to be that the water side isn't as important, even if it isn't economically as large and impactful as the electric side. And I certainly wouldn't want the staff on the water side to inadvertently take from that they're not important, because they are.
Other questions, comments, discussion? Gordy?
I was impressed with this. The council is currently working on a mission and vision and strategic plan, and I guess I'm asking if you would allow me to share this with them. I was very impressed with what you put together, and we're struggling right now.
If this is approved, it'll be going out with my report.
Okay, because, yeah, we have some issues.
I will tell you that this was
How long did it take?
I thought it was a fairly long process, but it was long because it was hard to get everybody's calendars together meeting-wise. The early stages, I think, were somewhat uncomfortable for some people because there was a lot of open discussion about a lot of ideas that some of them were a little off the wall. But the longer we talked about it, the more in line everybody got with where the direction was headed, I think.
Okay. How long did it actually take time-wise? Did you set aside a weekend to work on it, or were you doing it at different times?
Remember when we started?
I think it was about 3 months from beginning to end, and that really,
At least that.
was
yeah.
it that?
Probably 6, yeah.
Okay,
The outside facilitator we used came 3 separate times during that period.
Okay, what approximate hours do you figure you have in it at this point? Any
In meeting
idea?
with the commission, we had, what, 2 or 3 hours each?
Yeah.
Time?
have that logged. I think
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know, because we've been trying to do it once a month before our council meeting. We have 2 council meetings a month, and we take the second one and try to meet an hour and a half prior to the meeting starting for this. And there's been some discussion that it's taken forever. We've been at it about 10 or 11 months, but we're only doing an hour and a half a month.
I think
And-
some of our best discussion didn't happen until we'd been in a session for an hour and a half and could really drill
that-
down to some of the stuff.
That was the point that was made. The mayor said, listen, these typically would be done over a weekend from maybe 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. So in effect, what we've spent so far doesn't appear that long, but just the length of it so far is getting to some of the members, and we've had a little,
Yeah.
anyway.
We can-
but
we can come up with
I
a
was
summary
impressed
of
with
the-
yours.
Of the time,
But
yeah.
if you can come up with some hourly, that you've spent on it, it might help.
Our
Thank you.
situation's probably not as complicated as yours, though.
Well, perhaps not, but.
Well, we also had a good facilitator. Let me just say this for the public as well. We basically broke this up into 3 pieces at the recommendation of the facilitator. The commission piece, the managerial staff, and the talent experts at the utility, and then we all got together after we did those 2 separate pieces and pulled the thinking together and found the common pieces and explained and understood what the pieces were that we didn't see as commissioners or they didn't see as the executive level. And that's where we found the consensus to produce the final outcome. I think the facilitation is an important element of that. Having somebody who can herd the cats, if you will, was very beneficial to all of us.
I agree.
Okay, any other comments? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Proposed revision to the employee wage policy. Bob?
Yes, last month we went through the detail as to what had changed in the policy and revision. This month we have that same document we gave to you, as well as the policy itself and what we're proposing. I don't know if you want to walk through the different elements. It's basically the same thing that we had 2 months ago. We did make some changes, but overall, it's the same basic philosophy, I guess, as far as implementing a wage policy. One of the things that we were looking at as far as, if we implement this policy, then what do we do on our end as far as the review process? We would continue to have annual reviews like we did. They would shift to April instead of, right now, the reviews are periodically through the year on our anniversary dates. And with that, because we had a couple spreadsheets that we've been working on, and one would consist of probably a cost of living increase of some type, and then a performance adjustment that would be based on the review itself, and then possibly a section for special circumstances. And what that could be is those that are working toward the midpoint of their grade, or in this case, it would be their target wage, or it could be a promotion, something like that. One of the things we were looking at too was possibly having a cap on the wage based upon the actual review. So if somebody gets a 3.5 on the review, that would translate through some type of a formula to the actual cap on their wage. Then a portion of an increase could be given as a wage and a portion be given as a fixed amount. So we're just playing with different ways of doing it should this policy be approved. But we have looked at a number of options to try to make it more fair. In the end, I guess some method of being more objective as far as wage increases, and also just what the target range is. So, any questions on the policy?
Any questions, comments, discussion?
A comment if I can. I think there's really two things here. We gave Bob an objective to present to us, and I'm summarizing, an alternative to the current system. And there's nothing here that would suggest to me he has not met that objective well.
Are you talking about in terms of Bob's objectives for his performance
Yes.
review? Okay, just so I'm on the same page.
Because that's what sort of spurred this was one of the objectives we gave him for
Yes.
the following year.
That's probably why he brought it.
And, yeah, we've had an iteration, they've taken some feedback from us and some questions from us, they've come back with greater detail, they've fleshed out the thinking, they've explained. I think that the objective that we set for Bob of come with a recommendation, I think he's met that well. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is this something we want to do now? And that's a different question to me. So I think we should separate the two, that Bob has definitely done what we asked him to go do, and you've done it with your staff. Then the question is, do we want to implement a different system now, or do we want to chew on it, or do we want to do something else? So I just feel we should separate those out.
That's a good thing to clarify, thanks. Gordy, you ready?
Yeah. Melissa had in here about the city adding a bonus merit review system.
Okay,
I've served on that committee for 2 years now, and a year ago, we had a department head submitted his own name, and he didn't submit anyone in his department. And of course, we turned it down, and he appealed, and we still turned it down. We were struggling, and we still are, as to our department heads, are they not hired for the reasons that this merit bonus would be all about? This year, that same department head was submitted by his boss, and we approved it, the bonus in this case. But I'm personally still struggling with it. Should department heads be eligible for these things? Because do we not hire department heads to be over and above what the average worker is anyway, and that they should be doing these things as part of their normal job? So my inclination being on this committee is always to favor someone who a department head has recommended that is beneath them that has done something unusual in that particular year to benefit the department. That's where I'm leaning more, and we had a couple of department heads that got it this year because they were submitted by their supervisors and they had done some things too, but I still struggle with that. And I'm wondering if you've taken that into account at this point. How are you gonna treat department heads? Are they eligible for these bonuses too? We only have $10,000 set aside for this, so it isn't a great deal of money. And if we gave everyone $1,000, we'd only reward 10 people. And this year, the final total was about, I don't know, I want to say 2,500 under the 10,000, that we didn't even have that many submissions for people to be rewarded. We increased some. I think we perhaps decreased one or two, but for the most part, we increased them all. There would be one in there maybe for $750, and we'd allow $1,000, or one for $500, and we'd bump it up to $750, just because we had the money available this year. But I'm just throwing this out, that this may be something that you're gonna have to decide, do you wanna reward department heads with this too? Or is this primarily for?
Let me check my understanding of your proposal and see if I can answer this question.
All right.
The portion you're referring to, Gordy, is their background recap of the city's plan. In their proposal here,
Right.
they're not actually proposing a separate merit fund, so to say.
I understand that, and that's why I'm suggesting if you're going that route, you gotta think this through, because we didn't. And we're struggling now to
Okay.
some extent. I mean, it turned out all right this year, but last year was not a good year.
As I look at this policy versus the current system, and to John's comments, the assignment was bring an alternative, and this is a viable alternative. From my perspective as a commissioner, I look at the quintile system that's in place and has been in place, and there's general consensus that nobody likes it, but everybody understands it. And what you're proposing, most people understand it. What you're proposing actually reduces I don't know the right word, but it reduces the system. There's less systemicness to it. And there's more room for creativity. Instead of the commission populating a box based on information from the consultant about what's changed in the wage world in the last year in terms of wage ranges, which populates the rest of the formulas, which constrains you. Your proposal now says, we'll have a conversation, commission and manager, once a year, and we'll talk about how many dollars of compensation should be increased at the utility in the coming year, and then you would have the freedom as manager to allocate it however you so chose.
Correct.
All right, I understand it.
A comment if I can, to Gordy's comment. I understand where he went, and I understand that that was a surprise at the city level. But it seems to me that if you're empowering the general manager, you're giving him this tool, you want to recognize that that's a new tool, and it might take them time to become adroit with it. But having said that, Kathy has clearly defined objectives in her position. Yet if Kathy comes and finds a way to save our ratepayers $50,000 next year, that isn't one of her bullet points, and Bob wishes to reward her, to thank her for looking after the good of the stakeholders, I wouldn't want to constrain him from that. So I think that if we get outside of the bounds, if we adopt this, there should be a dialogue mechanism where Bob can come to the chair and go, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Do you think that's commission discussion, or do you think it's within the framework? And the two of you would collaboratively make that decision of whether you brought it before all of us or not. But I wouldn't want to take that tool away from him right when he's ready to do something good with it.
Okay. Point taken. Any other comments, questions?
This is a far superior system over the quintile system. Quintile system is typical government pay scale.
It is typical government. Now, the problems that we've
Very
expressed, or that we've heard about the quintile system over the last few years, are nobody ever gets up to their midpoint of their salary. How does this new system fix that problem?
What it does, basically, the old system, say, you could get there eventually, but it might have taken 7 to 10 years to get up to your midpoint, which is really the market value of the position.
Mhm.
With this position, we've got it, or this policy, is within 4 years, you reach 96% of that value. And we do that, so there's additional, basically, it's gonna be based on performance. Assuming you're meeting all the performance criteria, then we would increase your wage. If we started at the, say at whatever value it is, we would make sure that within 4 years, you're gonna reach that 96% level.
And
Correct
that's what-
correct me if I'm wrong. That's only if the commission authorizes those dollars.
Well, the dollars, the way the policy's written, the increase, the typical increase that the employee may see would be part of that dollar pool. Those dollars needed for that step adjustment, just like in our apprenticeship program. Our apprentices, all the linemen and the water people in the office, for that matter, all have step progressions.
Okay?
So the dollars that would figure into this plan would be those dollars that increase the wage, that progression, not necessarily the actual dollars, because they're seeing, okay, for example, say their step is a 2.5% increase from 1 year to the next. They're gonna see that regardless of what the commission does, because that's into their contract. That they have like the apprentices have a contract with
The
the
non-exempt.
state. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So they're going to see that step. What we would use for this would be if that step increases 2%, you say we're gonna do a 2% increase on those wages, then that dollar amount is what would figure into the plan. Not, you can't really take into their account that their progression that lasts for 4 years, because if you do, then you're basically shortchanging the others.
And that's where I'm trying to get to is, okay, let's keep the conversation on non-exempt for a minute.
Okay.
And let's assume that we hired somebody new,
Mhm.
and you hired them at something less than the midpoint. The plan that you're proposing, the procedure, does that have a step inherent in it that is independent of what the commission authorizes for wages as part of getting them up to the midpoint in 4 years? Or is getting them up to the midpoint in 4 years part of what the commission is authorizing, and you're gonna have the same problem of not getting people up to the midpoint if we don't authorize enough? Which is essentially
That's-
what the quintile has been doing. It hasn't been
Correct.
authorizing enough.
That's why the step progression is not part of the pool, because if it was, then you get that problem, as long as it's not part of the pool. So for example.
So there is a step portion inherent in this that I
Well,
missed.
If, it's not necessarily a step, but it says we'll get there in 4 years. So that indicates that you're gonna have a step.
So there's some, if we approve this policy, if I'm understanding it, there's some portion of dollars that wages are gonna go up without commission's approval.
That's actually the
Yes.
understanding that I had from our last
Okay.
discussion about that.
Yes. And that's happening all the time now with the hourly employees.
With the hourly, sure.
Right.
But it
not-
would be
not-
new
it
for
would
the
be new
non-exempt.
non-exempt. So for example, say you have a new employee starts, and we've got this plan that in 4 years, they're gonna reach their 96% of their wage scale. So, or of their target wage. So the first year, we do their evaluation, and it calculates out they're gonna get a 3% raise based on the calculation. That 3% would be deducted from the pool. It might take another 3% on top of that to make that step. That additional 3% would not be part of the pool, because that's additional adjustment, and that is, as we would spell out in our, the spreadsheet that I had worked on, that would be an additional column that would get them to that position. Once they're there, that goes away. But it's some way to escalate them to that 96% range faster.
96% of their target wage is the midpoint,
It's what is now the midpoint.
what is now the midpoint.
Right.
And last, last month, I think you threw out a number of roughly $15,000 was the difference between where the entire non-exempt group's wages are today and the entire non-exempt group's midpoint.
You have that figure?
Yeah, I think that was in the write-up. In essence, the quintile is running a little behind,
Right.
but not hugely.
About 24,000. 24,000 increases.
Is that with or without burden?
That's just straight wages.
That's just straight wage.
Yep.
And your burden is 65%?
Yeah, I think it's about somewhere in there. Remember? 70. Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
While I digest that, let me back up and ask a question. Okay, we give them to 96% of whatever the midpoint is. The midpoint changes every year. So do we keep chasing it? Do they keep getting automatics outside of the pool because we moved the midpoint?
No. No, once they reach that point,
Once they reach the initial 4-year 96 percentile, check mark, they've done it. They don't continue to get chased up as the midpoint moves, is that correct?
right.
Okay.
Right.
All right, I think that's an important distinction, because if they're gonna continue to chase it, then it's just as convoluted as this bureaucratic process we
but the
have now.
bureaucratic process we use today, that's a great question, because we're constantly chasing it today. When you say your non-exempt group is $24,000 below the midpoint, that's $24,000 below the adjusted midpoint, because the midpoint from when, to pick on Dave, when he started way back when,
Sure.
would be half of what the midpoint is today for his wage. He'd be way over the midpoint, and you're saying that we wouldn't be really adjusting his wage after he reached the midpoint of 25 years ago.
No, his wage is gonna continue to adjust according to his performance evaluation.
But it's only
But we're
gonna be
not-
performed, you're never gonna check what his target wage should be again.
Well, we'll be looking at it every year. And if we got to the point where it got really skewed, I guess we probably would.
So we would be
But-
chasing it.
But no, but the only way that's gonna happen, once you get to that point, the only way that's gonna happen is if, not to pick on Dave, but you brought him up. But say he's
Sorry in
performing,
advance,
say
Dave.
he's performing very poorly. So he's not getting a raise, or he's getting a 1% raise every year, and the midpoint starts to leave him. Well, that's,
Bob, let me say
based on
this back to you
performance.
and tell me if I captured it right. It wouldn't be automatic annually as it is now. It would be something that was reviewed and possibly presented upstream, but it wouldn't automatically happen as it does today with the quintile system. The difference is the existing system automatically pushes, the proposed system doesn't have that automatic after we get to the 96% of the midpoint in 4 years. Did I capture that right?
yes.
If I go back, here's where I keep coming from on this, is I'm okay to make a change if the change is an improvement. But change just to say we made a change for me doesn't make sense. So if I go back to that, and I go back to your $24,000 that the entire non-exempt group is short,
Excuse me.
have they all been outperforming their performance guidelines? I mean, none of those people that are below the midpoint
I guess the question
would be below the midpoint because their performance review has had, my question is,
Deficiencies.
does
Are they
the
underperforming?
does the quintile system actually put you where you're supposed to be,
No.
but you need a higher percentage in the center box to make the system work?
I guess I look at it as if they're below after, say, 4 years, they're still below their target wage or midpoint, the old system was a midpoint.
Okay.
That, to me, would indicate that they're underperforming, and that's not the case. You know, if we have people that are underperforming, we're dealing with it from another angle.
Okay. We've had a lot of discussion, but we never did a motion.
Oh, we got to that point.
Are we at that point? I'll make the motion to approve this.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the proposed replacement of the quintile system. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a second. Any other discussion?
I'm gonna put on my two hats here, one at a time. From a cost standpoint, this costs $20-some thousand more in the first year, and who knows how much more after that. It's difficult to project whether this would cost more than the quintile system in out years. From my management standpoint, I think it's an important tool to give Bob and his leadership team the ability to reward merit, reward performance, where the current system doesn't necessarily do that well. And I'll point out that when we looked at wage changes last year, we had some people who had very high performance reviews that on a percentage basis did not get as large an increase as people that had lower performance reviews. And I think that's an askew. And Bob suggested, and I have no reason to believe that he's not right about this, that that was a function of the quintile system and the way it worked. I consider that to be wrong. The person who got the highest performance review in the entire Marshfield utilities should get the highest percentage for that performance. That's the whole point of rewarding merit. So on one hand, this is gonna cost more. On the other hand, I think it helps with the retention, which we've talked about a lot. I think it helps with empowering the leadership team to encourage great performance and then recognize it and reward it in tangible and meaningful ways. And I think it takes that clunkiness of saying, coming to the commission going, well, we had this position and now we need you to reauthorize this position, then come back 2 months later, we found the person, now we need to authorize the wage, which we've already authorized because the position already exists. That's just incredibly clunky. This takes that out. So it's a trade-off. It's gonna cost more. But it's potentially more efficient and encourages the right behavior.
And it's important to understand that it costs more upfront, definitely, to get the people up to the midpoint. But long-term, it may end up saving us money, because one employee leaves, and it may cost you $25,000 to $50,000. They said a lineman leaves, it costs between $50,000 and $60,000 that we've invested in them in training, that's gone, just walked out the door. So from a standpoint of retention, as you mentioned, John, it's a valuable tool.
Do we have a motion and a second? Any other comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Approval of job orders.
Job orders, we have one job order, job order 17857. It's to replace underground primary that failed in 19th and Butternut Parkway, as long as a couple other sections of cable that are the same age. Typically what we do is we try to replace them all at once instead of going back and doing them individually. And that's in the amount of $43,542.
I have a question regarding this. The cost of this job order is $43,542, which is 3 times as much as replacing another single-phase underground on Chestnut Avenue. I
Depends on
just
the
wonder
length.
the
Great
reason,
question.
Yeah.
reason why.
I don't know the Chestnut Avenue, how long it is. Oh, I see, you're looking at one of those that did not come to the commission? My guess, it would be about 1/3 of the size of the project. Yeah, because typically they're pretty close. There's not a lot of adders on a project like this. You got the primary cable, the secondary distribution, transformers, which don't figure into their secondary pedestals. The equipment's all pretty standard. So it's
So it's still like-
gonna be project sized. Yep.
Says for 1701 Rochester. One building
Yeah, and I'm trying to think what that is.
instead of a whole subdivision.
Right. This is part of the subdivision.
This one says 1,240 feet. You don't know how many feet that
No,
one is.
without seeing the job order, I don't know.
And that's where the major component is, how many feet it is.
Mhm. Yeah, because this has a lot of boring in it.
Is there a motion to approve the job orders? Harry, second. Fight or arm wrestle.
You take which one?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
First and second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Bills and payroll.
Bills have been reviewed and certified proper for payment.
Is there a motion to approve the bills?
So moved.
We have a motion, second by Harry. Questions, discussion? John?
What tractor parts cost $62,000? What did we do?
backhoe. Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Backhoe.
All parts were combined into a backhoe. I
Why
saw the
wouldn't you
same
just
thing. and I
put
said,
it down as a new
well,
unit?
these are standard descriptions that stay with the account. So, yes, that was.
Okay, well, every time you
Yeah.
use the standard description for
Yeah.
$61,999.54 for the parts,
Yeah.
I'm gonna raise that question.
If we change it to a backhoe and then next month there's $1,200 for a new backhoe, you'll want us to buy lots of them.
Short Elliott Hendrickson, project management, what project were they managing for 20K?
SEH
That's-
is doing
But
Upham Street.
Okay, that's what that is. It's up.
Bills and payroll statements, they're kind of the same area. Last month on the cash flow forecast, we had the precipitous drop right off the bottom and you guys fixed it. But now I noticed that our net operating income is down 2 months in a row. Is that gonna get adjusted back through the PCAC, or is something changed and we've got something that we need to understand?
On the June financial statements, there were several factors. One of them was the required 5-year testing of M1. We had received $70,000 of revenue for the M1 for June, but we had about $49,000 of natural gas fuel expense and about $127,000 of diesel expense.
You kind of warned us about that last time.
Right.
the problem with that is you have to test it every 5 years. And when the time comes to test, it doesn't matter what the market is, you have to run. So you may end up actually paying them to take the energy during that time period.
Yeah, I noticed that too, 2 months in a row of net losses. But we're right on budget, so it was anticipated.
Sure. I
One
kind of
question.
got ahead on that, but go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's good discussion. Prepayments for July, on page 2, I see there's a legal fee. Can we disclose what that payment was for? It's about 2/3, 3/4 of the way down.
Boardman and Clark, 1,200. What they've been working on lately is the AT&T and Verizon tower. They've been doing a lot of work on that. There might be some miscellaneous, I think, Melissa, I think you had a couple of questions on, for Boardman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're actually on that page 2 or 3
Yeah.
times.
What's the AT&T Verizon?
They have antennas on our tower, up
Yes.
at Grant
The
Street
one that's
Tower.
being painted?
Yes, and there's some, they're wanting to do some upgrades to that, and there's a little bit of problem what they consider to be an upgrade and, or what we consider to be an upgrade, and they say it's not. They don't want to pay us additional fees, that type of stuff. Yeah, all of that charges back to them, all fees, or attorney fees.
Okay.
Okay, we have a first and second on bills and payroll. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of previous meeting minutes. Is there a motion? Harry?
Second.
Alan? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Operations and financial reports.
On the operations report, I think most of you know I've been working a lot with MUW lately. As president this year, I got stuck with the distinct honor of replacing 4 positions. So we're real close to selecting an executive director and also the marketing and member services manager. Those 2 we've been doing interviewing on for the last few weeks. And hopefully within the next couple weeks, we'll have a decision on those. We're just starting tomorrow, interviewing for the regional safety manager. We've got 3 candidates right now set up, could have another 1 or 2 before we're finished. And so hopefully within, maybe by the end of the month, we'll be closer to knowing what's going to happen there. And then just getting ready to start the process on the office position. And the reason that one's been delayed is we're looking at what do we want that job description to be like. We've been trying to analyze the duties that that person did and probably reducing the position somewhat to a lesser level, lower cost position. So hopefully within another month or so, we'll have fully staffed down at MUW.
Then we can have you back.
Then I'll be back full-time. The electric and water rate cases have been submitted. We are anticipating, as you know, the commission approved and the city council approved raising the rate of return on the water rate case. From what I've heard so far, we can probably anticipate a little pushback from the Public Service Commission staff on that. So I'm guessing with your approval or just if there's a consensus among the group that we would take that, push that to the full commission if need be. That if staff says, we haven't done this before, which is their typical reasoning, so we're not going to do it now, I'd want to take it to the actual PSC commission, the 3-member commission, and present the arguments to them and have them make a decision.
And that would be an in-person interview or?
Yes, it'd
Meeting?
most likely be a presentation in Madison before the commission.
I think we,
So-
in the discussion, you kind of prepared us for the
Right.
fact that that would be a first for them and that
Yep,
this
The
might
outcome
happen.
is worth the effort.
Yeah.
yes, I think so.
So yeah, I think we're all still on board for that.
Okay, good.
It benefits everybody.
Mhm.
All right, that's all.
Okay. Commission education item, everything you wanted to know about PCAC and more.
Before you do that, Bob, would you take 3 minutes and just review the storm for the sake of the audience?
As far as,
Just sort of the highlights.
okay, yeah, we actually had, so the main reason it was significant is because we had a pretty good size outage because of it. Mostly we had trees blown down up along Adler Street. We had a number of trees in that area, so we were able to, once the circuit tripped out, we were able to isolate it, get half of it back on rather quickly, but the other one took a few hours. We also had an outage over on the east side of town. If you remember, recently we replaced all the relays in Hume Substation. And when we did that, they're newer, they have a lot more capability than the old relays had. And the relays, I guess for the benefit of everyone, those are devices that monitor the circuit. If something happens out there, it trips it, automatically recloses it, and then trips it out again if the fault is still there. In this situation, the circuit relays and the transformer, the main substation relays, have the capability basically to talk to each other. And in doing that, they can both look at the fault and analyze it and make a determination. Well, the timing was really tight on the 2 relays, and this relay saw the fault, tripped the breaker. This one didn't realize that it had reclosed and issued a signal to say trip everything. So it took 3 circuits down instead of 1, is basically what happened. And then because of the timing, when it tried to reclose and the confusion among the relays, it actually burnt out a trip coil on the relay, so it couldn't, or a closed coil rather. So we ended up thinking, well, it could have been a fluke. Sometimes they burn out. We had the same thing happen on another breaker in that same substation. It also burnt out a trip coil, or a closed coil rather. So at that point, we were assured that it was not a fluke. There was something wrong in the coordination that was causing that. We had the consultant back who had done the programming on it. We've changed all the programming on it, simplified the process a little bit, so only the feeder relays now look out at the feeder, and then they will send a signal to the other backup relay if it needs to trip, not both of them trying to accomplish the same thing. So simplified the logic. Hopefully that will take care of any issues with these. It was a good thing it happened now before we had all the other ones programmed, because we'll be working on McMillan and Wildwood, the same type of scenario. So now we know a better way to do it.
Was there a loss of some equipment because of the burnout?
Just we had, on our equipment,
Yeah.
we had two closed coils, they're relatively inexpensive part, but, yeah, just had those fail.
Just in person hours to deal with the storm and the outage, we have some sense of what we threw at the problem? Because it seems to me that you reacted very quickly. And that in a very short time frame, you understood what the problem was, you divided it up into pieces, and you attacked it in pieces. Do we have some sense of, was there overtime hours, was there additional costs? Do we have some sense of
If we've
that?
ever, do you have the figures or not?
We didn't calculate it, but yeah, there definitely were overtime
Yeah.
costs involved in that.
I mean, much of the day, we had, well, the 9 linemen plus 3 people in the substation area, plus supervision. I was out driving the lines as well, looking for problem areas, and so, yeah, we had a lot of employees tied up for 6-8 hours.
And that's not reflected in our financials, because this is as of June, right? And the
Yeah,
storm
that
was in
was- that was July,
So we'll
yes.
see that next month.
Yes.
I guess the reason I asked the financial question is just to reinforce to the ratepayers that these things happen, and when they do, if you attack them quickly and you break it up into pieces, and you guys go take care of that problem, we're gonna go look over here. Yeah, there is a cost involved in it, but having that capability, having the staff, having a plan in place ahead of time, knowing how to triage, if you will, the problem, I think it's important. My sense from, fly on the wall was you guys did great. Just did great.
Thank you. Let them know.
Okay, thanks for the step back.
Thanks for letting me.
Was there anybody have any questions on the PCAC, or did you want to go through it at all, or?
I guess if there were any
I thought you wrote it up really nicely. Clear? Clear? John?
Did you have this, like, already written in some form, or did you just actually sit down and just compose it out for
We
us?
sat down.
Yeah, because it is very clear, and it's very concise, and it's
Well
very
written.
easy to understand
Yeah.
how it works.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. I think Alan got that one.
That'd be Alan and John. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.